Welcome back to the channel. Today I am finally working on the charger. Once again, I know a lot of you have been asking me what happened to the charger, why aren't you working on it, what is going on with the charger, etc, etc, etc. So I've been having a lot of issues with getting parts, and yes, I want to drive the car more than you guys want to see it done. Understand that. I really want this car done. It has been a nightmare getting some parts for it. So I finally have all the adjustable arms done, and I was waiting 4 months on one single Heim joint. So they sent me the incorrect one at first. Then I ordered a bunch of different ones from other companies so I can get these arms done. And then I just kept getting the wrong ones. I needed a right-hand thread. They sent me left-hand threads. They sent me the incorrect, like not even the right Heim joint. And now finally, 4 months later, we have all of the rear adjustable arms done for the charger. They're all anodized. I have everything for the coilovers. All of that is ready to go. So as you guys remember, I need to get the front subframe done. And what I was doing before was I was splicing the rear wheel drive charger front subframe with the Trackhawk front subframe. And it sort of worked, but it didn't. So I had a bunch of weird suspension geometry issues where it was so bad that the axles weren't lining up and stuff wasn't in the right locations, and I had a lot of caster and it just wasn't gonna work. So what I ended up doing was when I got the Durango panoramic roof skin from that salvage yard, I got a Charger all-wheel drive police subframe. So I'm using the suspension pickup points from that subframe as well as the mounting points to mount it into the chassis. So we'll have everything for the front subframe that we need, and then I'll just add the Trackhawk diff to those mounting locations as well as the electric steering rack from the Trackhawk. So we'll have everything we need. We can finally get this front subframe done, but what I want to accomplish today is getting the fixture made for this ordeal in this front subframe, just so we can get all this busted out. Then I can finally have the front subframe powder coated, the rear subframe powder coated. Once that's done, I can undercoat the car and throw all this suspension on, because I really want to see this car sitting on coilovers with wheels and ready to drop all the drivetrain in it. So what are we going to do now? We're going to get to work, get all this stuff done, and hopefully by the end of the video we have the fixture ready to go. So in the next video I can finish making the front subframe and get this thing finally done, and hopefully I don't have any more parts issues with this thing, and we can finally see this thing driving on the road, all-wheel drive, ready to rip. Let's go. have all the locations from the all-wheel drive V8 police car front subframe in the fixture. So we are ready to pull this subframe out, but I'm really happy that I did it this way because I was doing it this way and it almost worked, but then the lower control arm pickup points were 1 inch to ½ inch too far back, which centered the wheel too far back in the wheel arch. It wasn't going to turn, it wasn't going to look right. It just was, and it was going to have way too much caster, which would have been a really weird handling issue. So I'm really glad that I redid this because, you know, sometimes you just have to scrap a project and start over to get where you need to be. But I'm not going to scrap everything off of this. So as you guys remember, I did make the upper portions and I'm going to retain that because I have my engine mounting and I have those custom engine mounts. And then all this down here is pretty much where it needs to be. I may cut that back piece off because I don't think I'll need that anymore, because these lower control arms from the Charger all-wheel drive are actually normal. They have 2 bushings. They're on a plane, a flat plane, unlike the Trackhawk front lower control arms, which I really like how beefy they are, but it has the front bushing and then it has that weird rear bushing, which I really didn't like. So I'm going to use a Charger front lower control arms. All the suspension geometry comes off the subframe. I don't have to worry about any of that. All I have to do is locate a steering rack in there as well as the front diff. So I'm gonna pull the points out of this subframe after I get that subframe out of the fixture, and then we'll have the diff mounting locations. After I get the diff mounting locations, I have to figure out if I'm going to end up using the normal electric power steering rack from a Charger, which I have right there. I really want to use that, or if I end up having to use the Trackhawk front steering rack because the diff, it still needs to clear the diff, which the diff is very large and the steering rack, the shaft has to come up. But since I'm making 100% my own front subframe like I did on the rear one's hiding under there, I can pretty much turn the steering rack so everything works out and fits. It took me a while to figure out how I was going to mount the front diff into the fixture. So after a few revisions, I think I'm pretty much where I need to be. So what I ended up doing was I used the laser, marked center on the Charger all-wheel drive subframe, and as you can see, it's centered in that hole back there. But this is like the hook hole, so if you need to be pulled onto a rollback, I don't think it's supposed to be centered on that. But I went from lower control arm center of the bolt to lower control arm center of the bolt. We got that mark right there. And then what I did was I came over here and I did the same thing on this subframe. So I marked center on there, which really isn't that important, but to get center for the diff, I had to mark center on the subframe. So now I have the mark for the diff center, and all I need to do is line that line up with this line, and then to get it centered for the axles, I'm going to pretty much take the lower control arms, which are out there, pull the subframe out of the fixture, bolt the lower control arms to the subframe, then bolt this, where is it at? Bolt this guy right here, which is the coilover axle pass-through, which it goes pretty much like this, and the axle passes through it, but it has this center line right here. So I'll pretty much just line the laser line up here, then come over to the diff half. So as they cast it, they cast the halves because they connect right here. That is center. And I'll just line the laser up to this, to that, which is connected to the lower control arm, which is centered. And we'll finally have the diff mounted into the subframe. So I'm probably going to do that tomorrow because I need to have this on a nice flat plane. But what I'm going to do now is pull this subframe out of the fixture because I need it out of the fixture to do that, so we can get everything done with this diff finally. And also I have the splash shield, so it's going to mount up just like it would normally. And I need to make sure the diff isn't lower than the splash shield so that doesn't interfere with anything. So everything looks 100% factory. Plus you don't want the diff hanging lower than the splash shield because I've already scraped my splash shield on the Hellcat on this weird bump in town, which kind of made me mad. But yeah, let's get this out of the fixture and get this in there. Pulled the subframe out of the fixture. Both parts, or both halves, came apart pretty easy. I did use anti-seize, and it's pretty hard to pull it apart because of the anti-seize is just so, it's kind of cold out right now, so it's a little bit thicker. So I ended up cleaning all the anti-seize off and using WD-40, and now everything slips really nicely. So what I'm going to do now is we'll throw the lower control arms onto the Charger subframe. And the good thing about this subframe is it's pinned in, so there's no adjustment in the lower control arms. So I'll just throw them on and just put the laser on it, get everything lined up with the laser, and then I could throw the diff in there. I'll probably have to, I was planning on not messing this subframe up, but since I already had to cut it to make the fixture a little bit, I'm just going to cut this back section right here out, not all the way down, but pretty much flush with the base, so I can get the diff to just sit nice in there, and then I'll know it's not any lower than the bottom of the car. So if I hit a bump or hit anything, it won't hit the diff, it'll hit the skid plate and the bottom of the subframe instead. The front diff is now located pretty close to where I want it to be in the front subframe. And how I did that was I used those center lines, lined up the diff, used that axle pass-through, which the coilover strut mounts to, and the axle goes directly through it. And I also put the hub or the knuckle on there and just made sure everything was going to be good with axle angles. And I wasn't going to have to worry about excessive axle angles, because there is that issue with a high horsepower car, or even anything, I guess anything over 500 horsepower that's all-wheel drive. I'm going to drive the Charger. I'm going to take it to tracks. I want to be able to drive it and not worry about bottoming it out, having weird suspension geometry. I want to be able to drive it and be able to use it. So that being said, I shouldn't see anything over 10 to 12 degrees of axle angle, which I wouldn't want to see anything really over 15. 20, a lot of people say, is the max, but if the axle boot rips or the axle breaks, it's going to cause a lot of damage. It's going to cause a lot of cleanup and grease and a bunch of nastiness. So it's just nice to have something that I'll be able to drive, which it's not going to be super low, but it will be pretty much Hellcat stance is what I'm looking for. And that's a really good stance because it's all-wheel drive and it's a lot of stuff to fit in there. And it's, the normal all-wheel drive Chargers, they don't sit very low. So this is actually pretty surprising. So what I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to go over to the machine shop, use that table because I know it's true and flat, put the fixture on there, and then add this, line everything up with those center lines, and then I could get all the points for the diff mounting, and then I'll know it's flat, and then also the steering rack. So like I said before, I was thinking about using the Charger electronic steering rack. I don't think it's going to work. I mean, there's just too much going on. I might be able to get it work. I might try, but I'm not sure, because the steering shaft has to go over the diff. So I'd have to angle it, but then it also has to fit, and it has to clear all this stuff, which the Trackhawk one was already made to clear it. So I think the best plan of attack is to just get all the points from the Trackhawk subframe for the diff in the steering rack, and then just add it to the fixture, finish up making this front subframe, and finally be done with it. Be able to put all the suspension on it, weld everything up, and finally see the car with nice wheels, or, you know, Trackhawk wheels, blah, blah, blah. But I'll put nice wheels on it eventually, and with all the suspension, and actually low with coilovers on it, instead of, you know, being super high with Scat Pack wheels and just not looking really good, not looking at, you know, full potential. So, and then once these are done, it's really easy to swap all this stuff into the car, because everything's gonna bolt in, which will be really nice. So let's pretty much wrap this video up. Tomorrow I'll be going over to the machine shop, but I'm really happy that I was able to get this where it is, because it was a lot of machining and a lot of, I mean, little parts and flanges and stuff like that. It is a lot of tedious work to make a fixture. My first fixture, it worked, but I didn't really put as much time and effort into it, and this one looks really, really nice. So I guess the more fixtures I make, the nicer they'll be. And this one's a lot more compact than this, but there was a lot of pickup points that were on this fixture. So that being said, if you like these videos, make sure to click that subscribe button, throw a thumbs up, throw a comment below. As always, see you guys next time.